Welcome to This Explainer. You know, we're all surrounded by this invisible architecture of social rules. Think about it. Why do we all automatically face the doors when we step into an elevator? Or why do we get that little pang of guilt if we accidentally cut in line? Today, we're diving deep into how these unwritten norms actually function as subtle mechanisms of control. But more importantly, we're going to look at how we can completely flip that dynamic to build healthier, truly restorative communities. So, here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with the unwritten social rules, explore exactly why we conform to them, and then unpack this fascinating concept called the internalized social gaze. After that, we'll introduce the social discipline window, and finally, wrap things up with a practical, restorative approach. All right, let's kick things off with Section 1, the unwritten social rules. I like to call these the invisible strings. Every single day, we're navigating a maze of conventions, yielding to pedestrians, shaking hands, standing quietly in line. We almost never pause to think about them, right? But these unwritten rules are literally the baseline code of our society. They create order and give our daily lives a sense of absolute predictability.
Now, sociologists actually break these norms down into 3 tiers of severity. First, we have folkways. These are your casual, day-to-day manners, where if you break them, people just think you're a bit odd. Then we step up to mores. These carry some heavy moral weight. Think along the lines of honesty and integrity. And at the very top, we have taboos. These are the absolute unthinkable acts where a violation demands severe punishment from the group.
So, that brings us to Section 2. Why do we actually conform to all these rules in the first place?
Well, when we look at why we comply, 2 vastly different academic perspectives emerge. On one hand, we have the functionalist perspective, championed by Emil Durkheim. This view is pretty optimistic, seeing norms as the social glue that keeps society stable and integrated. But on the flip side, the conflict perspective, rooted in Karl Marx's work, argues something entirely different. It suggests that norms are actually tools of power, actively created and enforced by dominant groups to protect their privilege and maintain inequality. And building on that conflict perspective, theorists argue we don't just magically absorb these rules out of thin air. Instead, they're actively taught through what's known as a hidden curriculum. Our institutions, schools, the legal system, and yes, even our own families, socialize us to accept the existing social hierarchy without really questioning it. Basically, we're taught obedience and conformity right alongside our ABCs.
This idea of institutional conformity leads us right into Section 3, the internalized social gaze, or, as it's often called, the Panopticon effect.
To really grasp how this power operates on a personal level, we have to look at the philosopher Michel Foucault. He used this brilliant, chilling metaphor of the Panopticon. Imagine a circular prison with a central guard tower. The guards can see into every single cell, but the prisoners can never see the guards. Because a prisoner might be watched at any given second, they have to assume they always are. Foucault argued that modern society functions the exact same way. We don't have an external guard anymore. We've internalized the guard, placing it inside our own heads, which forces us into a permanent state of self-regulation.
So, here's the crucial question. How does this kind of Foucauldian surveillance manifest outside of a literal prison? What happens when it seeps into our most intimate domestic spaces? What happens when our own home becomes the Panopticon?
A really fascinating paper analyzing the post-independence Hindi literature of Manu Bhandari illustrates this perfectly. Bhandari's fiction dives into the lives of women navigating the clash between tradition and modernity. And when you look at it through this Foucauldian lens, you see how our female protagonists are constantly being disciplined by this unyielding, invisible gaze of society and family. Let's look at some examples from her work. In the novel Apka Bunti, a divorced mother's every single move is scrutinized in a courtroom, basically evaluating her fitness as a mother against this completely impossible social ideal. Then in Trishanku, we see the Panopticon operating inside a joint family. A young woman's desires are relentlessly monitored by her elders, creating this paralyzing pressure. And in Mahabhoj, a marginalized woman's body and trauma are policed by broader political forces. In every single instance, this constant external surveillance ultimately forces these characters to internalize an oppressive gaze, simply out of a fear of being excluded. If that punitive surveillance is so damaging, how do we fix it? That brings us to Section 4, the social discipline window.
Let's explore a totally different way to approach norms and discipline. The social discipline window operates on just 2 simple metrics. On the vertical axis, we have control, which means limit setting and maintaining boundaries. And on the horizontal axis, we have support, which is all about encouragement and nurture.
Now, depending on how you balance those 2 metrics, you end up in one of 4 distinct domains.
If you have high control but low support, you're being punitive. You're doing things to people. Low control and low support, that's just neglectful. If we swing to high support but low control, we become permissive, doing things for people without actually holding them accountable. But that top right box, that's the sweet spot. Balancing firm boundaries with high nurture puts us firmly in the restorative domain.
And this perfectly captures the fundamental hypothesis of restorative practices. It is a profound shift in mindset. The core idea is that human beings are fundamentally happier, far more cooperative, and significantly more likely to make lasting positive changes when authority figures do things with them rather than to them or for them. It literally replaces the Panopticon with a partnership.
So, what does doing things with people actually look like? Let's dive into our final section, a restorative approach.
The continuum of restorative practices is essentially our practical toolkit for managing tension and repairing harm. It deliberately moves from preventative, everyday community-building actions on one end all the way over to responsive actions for when things inevitably go wrong.
These tools range in their formal intensity. Down at the foundation, we have informal affective statements. This is as simple as sharing how someone's action made you feel using I statements. From there, we move up to relational conversations to build empathy, then problem-solving circles to bring everyone together as equals, and finally, structured formal conferences for those really severe incidents. But here is the absolute golden rule of this entire system. 80% of your interactions should be proactive community building. You want to invest heavily in the preventative side of that continuum, because if you build high social capital and really strong relationships proactively, you'll only ever need to spend about 20% of your time actually reacting to conflicts and issues.
By prioritizing dialogue and actively making amends when harm is done, this framework teaches us something absolutely vital. True discipline isn't about that punitive, Panopticon-style surveillance Foucault warned us about. I mean, the Latin root of the word discipline actually means instruction and learning. Ultimately, it's about repairing broken relationships and addressing the real needs of the community.
As we wrap up this explainer, we've journeyed all the way from those invisible, unwritten rules that control us, through the oppressive nature of a surveilled life, straight into a powerful framework of high support and high accountability. So I want to leave you with one final thought to ponder about your own life, your workplace, or even your family. Are your daily interactions enforcing a punitive gaze, doing things to people, or are you doing things with them and actively building a restorative community?